Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who's on the stream tonight. We have Raven1983 Witch, great to see you once again. Lost in France, great to have you on. Nico, thanks so much for that super chat, very kind of you. We have Jean T, great to see you. We also have Lenan, great to have you on, hope you're well. Evening all, this is scary. I'm not sure what you're talking about, although I think it's a little late for Halloween. I presume you're talking about COP26 and Boris Johnson's antics there. We also have Wayne, great to see you, Wayne. We also have Killer, great to have you on moderating once again. Thanks so much for that. Derek McCall, great to see you, Derek. Hope you're fine tonight. We will do this. We certainly will. Good to have you on. ANPJ2006, great to see you. We also have Chatty Rat, great to have you on. Oh, we're up to almost 200 viewers, so I have to go pretty quickly as usual. Reagan Elite, great to have you on. I hope you're well tonight. We have, let me see, Freddy, great to have you on. Enzo the God, great to have you on too. Tiny Demolition Lover, hope you're fine tonight. Great to see you. We also have Remain, great to see you. I'll have to go really quickly. John O'Sullivan. Who else do I see? Aki's Mad, great to see you. CJM, great to have you on. Number Free, great to have you. Eddie, great to see you too. And I have to go down to the right down to the bottom. We have Valerio, thanks so much for that super chat. Hi Max, this Brexit is always a pain in the ass, yes. And I'm afraid it's going to go on for some time. We're not going to escape from Brexit. Brexit is certainly not done, as Boris Johnson promised, even though he tried to bury it some time ago, and stop talking about Brexit. But yes, it is a pain in the ass. And unfortunately, from February, it's probably going to get worse because rules of origin are going to come in, and that's going to make it very difficult for many exporters, because if you're importing goods from, for example, from China or from Asia, other parts of Asia, and the goods are not produced to a certain level, or if not enough of the goods are produced of the components, are produced in the UK, it'll be a problem to export them, or they'll be subject to tariffs, which will, tariffs along with the paperwork that's necessary is going to make it very difficult for many companies. And we've seen how, for example, Nissan have been trying to produce as much of the cars in the UK in order to avoid the problems of rules of origin. So, for example, the batteries, they're trying to produce the new electric car batteries in the UK. They're getting money from the state to do that, which is, is good in a way, but obviously it's a cost. It wasn't necessary before. It's a cost. It's a Brexit cost. Thanks for that super chat, Valerio. Hope you're fine tonight. David McGuinness, great to see you. Hope you're fine. Night Raven, great to see you. Cyber Crouch, great to have you on. Fanatica, great to see you. Martin, and so many more on tonight. David McGuinness, evening Max. Thank you so much, David. Keep up the good work. Keep on trucking. No pun intended. or pun intended. Thanks so much for that. Have a great evening too. Maybe I'll talk to you later on Discord. Very kind of you, David. Let's see. Did you read the link from Rizal on Discord? I'm not sure which link you're talking about, Reagan Elite. Maybe you can describe what you're talking about there, and if I remember. How is Amazon going to do then? They should be fun. That should be fun for them. I have no idea how Amazon is going to. Probably, it might be a case of having goods shipped to Europe and then shipped to the UK, and then shipped back. No, I don't know how it's going to work. We'll see. The same to you. Good evening from Savoy. Great to see you on, Pierre. Hope you're well. First time here, living in France and still enjoying it. Great to have you on the stream, Mac. Great to have you enjoying France. It's a wonderful place. So I just want to start off with this first article, not a very serious one, but it's a lead-in for Brexit. It says here, Morrisons apologizes for non-EU salt and pepper chicken label. So you've probably heard about this already. It was on social media. It says here, Morrisons Supermarket Group has apologized after it labeled a chicken product as containing British poultry and non-EU salt and pepper. The decision to detail the origin of the ingredients on its 4 pounds oven-ready chicken crown prompted a threat of boycott from some customers. The company, which has long prided itself on the sale of British produce, including 100% British fresh meat, milk and eggs, immediately backtracked, telling customers that the non-EU part of the label was a mistake. The wording on the packaging was an error, for which we apologize. We are changing the packaging immediately, it tweeted. So you can see here on the original image, it says here, salt and pepper, chicken crown roasted in a bag from made from British chicken and non-EU salt and pepper. David Faulkner, thanks so much for that super chat. Good morning, Max. Following you from the east. Hope you're well over there. Over in Hong Kong, I presume Hong Kong. I see the Hong Kong dollars. Thanks so much for that super chat. Thanks so much for the support, and stay safe over there in Hong Kong. Hope you're well. Great to have you on tonight, or this morning, as the case may be. So you can see here this the culprit here, non-EU salt and pepper. Now, is this serious? Look, when I saw it online, I was like, okay, it's another attempt to keep the Brexiteers happy. I don't think it was an error in the public. Somebody put it in without thinking, perhaps, or maybe it was intentional. I don't know. So it goes on to say, it's understood that the labelling was a result of misinterpretation of packaging and labelling regulations. After Brexit, label rules largely follow EU regulations, which state any food product marked British by flags or words must include the statement about the origin of any primary ingredients that are not British. In Morrison's case, the name of the product included salt and pepper, so they are classed as primary elements, and their provenance must be stated on the label in 75% of the size of the font used for the word British. The incident in this is not so serious. Okay, the incident is the latest sign of a new front on the culture wars opening on supermarket shelves, with some who agreed with packaging that celebrates Britishness and others who do not. On Tuesday, Morrison said it was fully compliant with the labelling rules but did not want to be drawn into the Brexit culture wars. Our chicken label is adhering to British packaging regulations. However, we will be redesigning it to make it clear that it's not a political commentary, it said. One customer, David Bright, said, "I'm done with shopping at Morrisons. I can live with Union Jacks on bananas, but the gratuitous slight on the EU is too much." Another customer tweeted, "Have I missed the new trend for our groceries to celebrate their exclusion of any EU condiments?" So I think this is, maybe there's more to it than meets the eye. It's an attempt to promote Britishness, the Union Jack being, or Union flag I should say, being stamped all over the place. And if you're a supermarket, you understand that many people want, and it's not about Brexit, I think a lot of people want to support their country. They want to appear patriotic and buy local produce or buy national produce. And I think it can get a bit confused with this sort of fake patriotism or this plastic patriotism. And this is probably a case of that, where they went, look, the chicken is British, but the salt and pepper is not. And instead of writing, they should have written something maybe different, saying non-British salt and pepper. Why non-EU? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Non-EU. Just write British, or I don't know, wherever the salt and pepper came from. I really don't understand why they put non-EU on this, but it seems it was a mistake. Never mind, we have old British sewage. Let me read. Yeah, your comments are gonna probably break me tonight on issues like this. Love your channel, Max. Thanks for highlighting the craziness of Brexit. Irish in Amsterdam. Great to have you there on, Inda. Hope you're well tonight. Hope you're enjoying Amsterdam. Don't worry, UK. Poland will soon join you outside the EU to start a powerful coalition of proud sovereign countries. Yes. I was going to say souvenir there for a moment. Plastic patriotism. Boil or roast in a bag patriotism. Just wait for the chicken. Just wait for the chickens are seasoned with non-EU herb de Provence. Herb de Provence. It's weird that non-EU should say where they're from. Yeah, they should have said, South American pepper or I don't know, Russian salt or something like that. British people have an obsession with buying local. Watch Come Dine With Me in the UK and you'll see. I remember that show, Come Dine With Me. There used to be, I think he died some years ago. There was the commentator who was hilarious. So Come Dine With Me is where you invite people, some celebrities invite or non-celebrities invite people around to their home and they judge each other's food and presentation and things like that. Non-EU salt and pepper, yes. It's like, don't worry, it's non-EU. We don't know where it's from, but it's not from the EU. So I do think maybe this was an error. It was not intentional. Before we move on, just read more of your comments. We don't want no foreign salt and pepper. What's wrong with chalk dust and pencil shavings? Reminds me of that scene in Blackadder where they had run out of coffee and they had run out of cream and they had run out of sugar and they had run out, and Baldric had told Blackadder it was in the Blackadder Goes Forth, so it was in the First World War, and they had run out of all these foodstuffs. But Baldric was like saying, yeah, we ran out 6 months ago, but you had coffee this morning. Like, yeah, but you don't want to know what was in it. Non-EU German sausage. Good point, Wayne. Cappuccino. Just stupid, yes. Dandruff. For COP26, exactly, Mark says single-use plastic patriotism. Salt is salt and pepper is pepper. Milk substitute. Yeah, we didn't get to that point, thankfully. So let's move on. So that was not a bit of a storm in a teacup there. It says here, salmon supplier to the Queen has to turn away business because of Brexit. So this is not good news, and something I feel really bad about all of this when it comes to Scotland and Wales. Well, less of an extent to Wales because, yes, the majority of people today in Wales support remaining in the European Union, but Wales, in a sense, did vote to leave. But apart from Northern Ireland, who's actually benefiting now from the protocol as a consequence of Brexit, the Scots are always on the losing end here, are always on the losing side when it comes to, sorry, not the losing side, but they always get the bad end, the worst end of the stick when it comes to Brexit, it seems, because so many businesses in Scotland rely on exporting, and they voted to remain in the European Union, and of course they were dragged out against their will. So it says here, a Scottish seafood processing firm which supplies fish to the Queen says it's losing business because of labour shortages blamed on Brexit. Christopher Lee, Chief Executive of John Ross Jr., an Aberdeen-based in traditional smoked salmon producer, claims the current workforce crisis cannot be overcome without intervention from government. Since Brexit, the firm has struggled to attract the staff required to fulfill international orders, with many EU nationals choosing to return to mainland Europe. Mr. Lee now wants the UK government to help businesses meet the challenge of finding workers. And what has been the solution so far? Well, temporary visas. seasonal work visas. And a small number of them, of course, is not enough. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a bidding war where businesses who need staff will offer higher wages, of course. But what will happen is you'll have some businesses paying higher wages and other businesses actually going bust because they can't either afford to pay the higher wages or they just can't get the staff anyway. And the larger companies who have deeper pockets will have all the staff that they need. A sort of disaster capitalism, not by design, but by accident, in a sense. I don't believe this was the goal. This type of action was the goal of Brexit, but definitely disaster capitalism is part of is one tier of Brexit. Simpkins, thanks so much. Timothy, thanks so much for that super chat. Very kind of you. No comment, but thank you very much for that support. Greatly appreciated. Hope you're having a great evening. Bosses at the award-winning previously accused the government at the award-winning firm previously accused the UK government of gross incompetence in a row over post-Brexit exports of Scottish seafood. He says, we raised the issue of a staffing crisis prior to the global pandemic. The response we received at the time from the Secretary of State for Scotland, Alistair Jack, who suggested our concerns stem solely from a fear of having to pay our employees more, was disappointing. And this has been the response from the Brexit government, is just pay your staff more. So you've put us into this situation where we can't get the staff we need, and your solution is, well, just pay local people more. But many local people can't do the job. They're not trained to do the job. And we can't just hire people who are untrained, because our business would collapse in a short amount of time, and we'd have pay these people a lot more than they deserve. I'm not saying you shouldn't pay people more, but the problem is it'll create a bidding war. If you only have a small number of employees available, these businesses can't compete, especially the smaller companies you see around Scotland, for example. Large supermarket chains, large logistics firms have deep pockets and they can pay. For example, Lidl supermarket chain or Amazon, for example, they have very deep pockets. They can pay for the staff that they need. They're not suffering to the same extent as smaller producers. He continued, we are now in a situation whereby we're having to turn away business as a result of our inability to meet demand. Think of a situation where you have customers saying, we want to buy your product, and you can't actually fulfill those orders. And I know that John Ross isn't the only business facing this challenge. So it goes on to say, he says, the government support for export has never been so high, which makes it easier for companies to distribute their products overseas. However, the firm's boss adds, this does little good if companies such as ours cannot attract the staff required to fulfill international orders. Mr. Lee claims that that this is being compounded by global firms such as Amazon, who recently announced it was offering new warehouse workers £1,000 joining bonus in a bid to attract new recruits. There we go. As I said, a large company like Amazon can afford to give people a bonus of £1,000 just to work for them. And, how can a small producer afford to do that? They can't. And there's no response. The response from government is, well, then offer more than £1,000. Get into a bidding war with Amazon, the richest company, if not one of the richest, or if not the richest company on the planet. He added, we've been in business for almost 40 years, and we've seen our fair share of crises, all of which we've dealt with head-on and managed ourselves. And this has been the spirit of a lot of these small companies. The government or the world economy throws something at them and they're able to deal with it. But when it's something like this, where the government have introduced barriers to trade, it's very difficult for you to get around that. You're not in control. You can't just innovate your way out of this. you're confined by this. However, this crisis is very different and the one that cannot be overcome without intervention from government. The UK needs a labour force, and it needs it now. We urge the government to take action before it's too late. So we have this damaging legacy of Brexit. Audrey Nicholl, MSP for Aberdeen South and North Kinclardine. I know I mispronounced it. Scots will be angry. Who met the salmon producer last month, wants the UK government to take action on skills and labour shortages caused by Brexit. The SNP politician says several businesses told her they are facing significant labour shortages, including the hiring of drivers, problems caused by a fuel crisis, and uncertainty with their supply chains, primarily as a result of the lack of heavy goods vehicle drivers. Staff shortages are hitting the haulage, farming and hospitality sectors. And farming, for example, I covered in a video earlier today, where cabbage producers are having to let the vegetables rot in the fields because they don't have the staff to pick them. Or they're even inviting members of the public just to come and pick whatever vegetables they want because it makes sense for them just to pick something than just to let them rot in the field. And they're losing £1 million. They've lost £1 million so far because of this. And it's not getting better. That's the problem with Brexit that people seem to not remember. That Brexit isn't some sort of temporary problem. It's a long-term problem. And it's potentially a permanent problem unless politicians in Westminster do something about it. So when I said Brexit is permanent before, I got a slap on the wrist before. It's permanent until something is done about it. If politicians in Westminster just sit on their hands, it will become permanent. Stuart, thanks so much for that super chat. Back to Brexit Ireland on Monday. This is to help keep your live streams going and keep us sane. Thank you so much, Stuart. Very kind of you. I will indeed. And best of luck going back to Brexit. I don't know which is worse, Brexit or Plague Island, which is it? Oh my god. Thanks so much for that. This is, she went on to say, Miss Nichols added, this is the damaging legacy of Brexit lay bare for all to see. The Scottish government put a wide range of support in place to support local businesses pre and post-pandemic. However, in tackling this pressing issue, Scotland remains at the mercy of Boris Johnson's Tories. You know, one of the arguments I think that the SNP and the independence movement can use to promote Scottish independence is, when it comes to Brexit, our hands are tied. When it comes to the pandemic, we have some wriggle room. But when it comes to Brexit, we have to rely on Boris Johnson's government. They're the ones who decide immigration policy. We don't have any control over that. So we can't bring in workers. We can't, and this is something that is quite frustrating, and it's frustrating for me to talk about, but it must be deeply frustrating for the Scottish people and Scottish businesses in particular. They would love to have something like the Northern Ireland Protocol, the Scottish Protocol, something like that, where they could have frictionless access to the single market, the European single market, and the customs union, where they could import and export goods without the problems that that Great Britain is facing at the moment. Something like the Northern Ireland Protocol would be wonderful for Scotland. Would it fix all the problems? Of course not. Brexit would still exist. But why can't Scotland have something like the Northern Ireland Protocol? The Scots would like it. The European Union, I don't think, would have a problem with it. But Westminster wouldn't want it. But Westminster wouldn't benefit from it. That's the worst thing about it. Reagan Elite, thanks so much for that super chat. I asked Mike Graham how he grows concrete on Twitter. He blocked me, and now I don't know how to grow it. That's really weird. You're asking for gardening advice or horticultural advice, and he blocks you. Maybe he's getting so many requests he just can't reply to them all. That's, when you're an expert in something, you're going to get huge number of requests, for your expertise. So it's a wonder how. I wonder why he blocked you. Probably because he just can't deal with all the requests. There was no malice, there was no malicious intent there. Of course, Reagan elite. Oh my God, growing concrete. And the way how he came back after and says, this video went viral because I shut up the crusty old hippie, or the crusty young hippie. No, it went viral because you're an idiot. Nico says, did someone say UBI? UBI would resolve a lot of these problems, of course. Of course, Rishi Sunak is no big fan of UBI because that would mean poor people would no longer be poor. And the Tories wouldn't like the idea of poor people no longer being poor. They like poor people to be poor because then they're easily manipulated. It's easy to convince them to be angry because they're poor with people who are poor as well. People coming across the sea in rubber boats, be angry with them, be angry with nurses or doctors for asking for more money, be angry with people with no power, angry with teachers, angry with people on strike, angry with, always angry with people who have no money or almost no money or no power. But certainly don't be angry with politicians, don't be angry with the heads of media, the owner of The Sun or the Daily Mail or the Express. Don't be angry with those people, of course. It's always redirected away from those. And, if people had a UBI, maybe they would be angry with the likes of the owner of The Sun or the Daily Mail or the Express. Because they wouldn't have to be working 24/7 almost. Epic video with Concrete Girl. He has been taken apart for over that. Sunak hates the idea of workers having any bargaining power. Yes. He's married to a billionaire, or the daughter of a billionaire, I should say. So he's not interested in the trials or tribulations of ordinary people. So let's move on away from Scotland down to France. And it says here, France backs down in fishing row after Jersey offered to move things forward. So this is very strange because there was a sort of problem. Well, I think it was a storm in a teacup once again, but there was a bit of a fight going on between France and the UK. Over fishing rights, and a boat was impounded, it seems, and the crew were taken into custody, but interrogated by the French authorities. Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, said, do something within the next 48 hours or they'll be hell to pay. And the French released the boat, it seems, and they backed down from a threat that they were going to block the port of Calais, which would have been extremely disruptive to trade going into the UK. And you would see the empty supermarket shelves would become much, much emptier if that had happened. And it's been proclaimed in the likes of the pro-Tory media that, see, this was Boris Johnson and Liz Truss facing down Macron, and Macron cowering in a corner and saying, yes, okay, I'm sorry, we won't do anything. When in reality, it seems Jersey stepped in here and said, we're going to issue more licenses. Because remember, Jersey has to trade with the European Union. It's right next door to France. And they don't want to have problems with France. They're not interested in creating political problems with their biggest market. So it goes on to say here, so it says here, France backed down from its threat to clog up British trade and ban UK fishers from its ports after Jersey offered to speed up approval for 5 or 6 new fishing vessels in its waters. Ian Gorst, Jersey's Minister for External Affairs, said the offer from his administration, which was mirrored by the UK government over an undisclosed number of boats, had proven to be a good way to move things forward. Paris had set a deadline of midnight on Monday, by which it demanded further licenses for its vessels in UK and Jersey coastal waters, only for Emmanuel Macron to announce that he would shelve his government's plan after last-ditch talks called by the European Commission. It's not while we're negotiating that we're going to impose sanctions, the French president told the reporters in Glasgow, where he was attending COP26. The boats expected to have their approval expedited, having been initially rejected, are replacements for older vessels that had a track record of having fished in the coastal waters of the UK and Jersey. So the problem here was that the UK government had said, look, if you want to continue to fish in these waters, you have to provide evidence that you have fished before for a certain number of years. And there was a dispute over the number of licenses given and whether certain vessels had proven that they had been fishing in these waters. And this is where I haven't commented a lot on this, because the big problem I had was I didn't know how to comment on this, because it's difficult to find out who was right and who was wrong. The information coming out was not very clear, because it wasn't clear whether the fishing vessels, the French fishing vessels, had proven that they had fished in the water long enough, or it wasn't proven that the British were using this as some sort of way to beat the French. And I didn't want to, jump to the conclusion that yes, it's the Brexiteers trying to cause problems here. I don't think that was the case. I think it could have been a bit of wrong and right on both sides here. Thon, thanks so much for that super chat. Make Jersey French again. I don't think we're going that far, but Jersey certainly wants to have a closer relationship with the European Union. What's interesting, and for me it was quite surprising, although it shouldn't really have been surprising, about how Gibraltar, has completed negotiations to join Schengen. In a sense, it makes sense, because if you want to move, Gibraltar is a tiny place. If you want to move into Spain, it makes sense to have something to be part of Schengen. But they negotiated to join Schengen, and it seems that Jersey wants to have a closer relationship with the European Union, while the UK wants to go in the opposite direction. Of course, Jersey is not part of the United Kingdom. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. Hello, did you see how much exposure Nicola Sturgeon got during the last few days at COP26? She really put Scotland on the map. Yes, she did. She met with, I think she met with the President of the United States. She met, I think she did anyway. She had a chat with him. She met with Greta Thunberg, and she also met with Sir David Attenborough, which was nice to see. And I think she, I think this benefited her a great deal politically. I think there were some problems, of course, with COP26, the organization of it, and there were some issues with, there was I think there was a diplomat from Israel who's disabled, who had trouble getting in. That was embarrassing, I think. But there were some other issues. But in one of the things I thought which was quite disgusting, but this has nothing to do with Nicola Sturgeon, was how so many limousines were parked around side roads and back roads in Glasgow to deliver all these dignitaries to the event. Look, really, was that necessary? Couldn't they have come by bus? I don't think Glasgow is that dangerous. Okay, I think the bus would have been able to get through. There are probably dangerous parts of Glasgow, but you would be able to, ask a guide beforehand. Say, can you direct us? Or close off some of the roads if necessary. But was it necessary for them to come each in their private limousines? I don't think that it would have been a good show of solidarity with the environment, even just for one day or the 2 days that it took place. to come by bus. No, an electric bus, a methane powered bus. I don't know, or LPG powered bus. Something a bit more ecological than driving a friggin' chauffeur driven limousine. And most of these limousines are, internal combustion engine ones. They're not even electric or hybrid, I don't think, that was not very good. But yeah, it definitely showed Nicola Sturgeon as, once again, to be a competent leader, while Boris Johnson was asleep, literally. Thanks so much for that super chat, DC, once again. Claudio, thank you so much for that super chat too. Almost all citizens from Gibraltar have double nationality. That's why Schengen. Very thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. So if you have Spanish and Gibraltar citizenship, is it British? No, because they're not. Well, yeah, they'd have British passports, I think. Someone please. I haven't checked into Gibraltar in a while now, but they definitely need to have access to Spain, because a lot of them live there or they work in Spain as well. So it makes sense for them to be part of Schengen. It's much easier. It's problem free in a sense, and I think in a way this is interesting because you have these smaller parts of Britain, not even parts of Britain, but overseas territories, which are saying, we need to have a closer relationship with Europe. We see the positive aspect of this. And they're sort of immune to the Brexit rhetoric, I think. Thanks so much for that, Claudio, and thanks for that correction. Or that information, I should say. Let's move on. So it says here, Paris has set a deadline of midnight on Tuesday, had set a deadline on midnight on Tuesday in which it demanded further license for its vessels in UK and Jersey coastal waters, only for Emmanuel Macron to announce that he had shelved the idea. Okay. The boats are expected to have... Oh, no, I've already read that. Sorry, I got a bit distracted. Asked about the issue of reports at the COP26 summit, Boris Johnson indicated that the UK had not changed its position and played down the issue's importance. The Prime Minister said, "We are working very, very closely with our French friends and partners on the things that matter most to the people of the world, and that is tackling climate change and reducing CO2. By comparison, what would be a hugely important issue, the ones you mentioned, are really vanishingly unimportant because it was an embarrassment. But since you ask about whether the UK has changed its position on the fishing issue, the answer is no. But Jersey Jersey, change your position. That's the sort of weaselly way out of this. Jersey issued more licenses. Now, I don't know whether Jersey could do that without permission from the likes of Boris Johnson. Maybe they can issue as many licenses as they want, but they were able to resolve this problem. Once again, this is Boris Johnson being upstaged by someone else. He's upstaged by Nicola Sturgeon. He's upstaged by the leader, the government in Jersey. Boris Johnson should not be running the country. I don't know who can still think he's doing a good job. The UK and Jersey has said that they will issue licenses only to boats that meet the test and be able to prove that they have previously operated in the coastal waters. Well, if you're issuing more licenses, then I presume that that's no longer a requirement. Jersey has so far rejected 55 applications, of which 5 or 6 are replacement boats. Goss said his government was willing to examine any new evidence boat by boat for the rest after a request by the Commission. French Minister for the Seas, Enrique Gerardin, told the National Assembly that France wanted clarity from the UK by Tuesday evening on how 14 vessels could secure licenses in its waters. She also called for swift agreement on the issue of replacement boats and requested that Jersey agree to reconsider its position on a further 13 boats whose applications to fish in Channel waters had been rejected. The row until now had been dominated by a dispute over the type of evidence that is acceptable, with France insisting that the set of data known as Syracuse, which provides a rough estimate of the vessel's movements, should be enough. Gross said that this appeared to be softening from the French on this point, however. Talks will continue between officials for the next 48 hours. The UK Cabinet Minister Lord Frost is to meet Clément Barrot, the French Minister for European Affairs. I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing these names, in Paris on Thursday. Gore said the developments had created a breathing space, but admitted to concerns that relations could turn sour if France was unable to offer extra evidence to secure permits beyond the handful of replacement vessels. David, thanks so much for that super chat. Can you comment on Gordon Ross saying that Rishi Sunak could potentially put an end to Scottish devolution with the stroke of a pen? So yeah, I saw the beginning of that video. I didn't see the whole video by Gordon Ross because somebody had mentioned it to me as well. But in a sense, yes, I haven't seen the video, so I can't comment on it completely. But Scottish devolution is dependent on, in a sense, on a budget that's sent, not completely, but partially dependent on a budget sent from Westminster. So this GRP, I think it's called. I'm forgetting the terms now. But if the UK government decide we're not going to respect that, and the Chancellor can decide that, or he can decide to reduce it, or can put it in a position where he has a lot of leeway. I think there are a lot of tools that he has in his arsenal against, not so much stopping independence, but I think there is a way of watering down devolution. I think part of the internal market bill is to take away power from the Scottish government by setting up organisations run by Westminster in Scotland who will decide how certain money is spent. They will decide what sort of conditions are put on trade, and this could really handicap the Scottish government and its ability to operate, to raise money, to raise taxes, or to regulate trade, for example. If you have some other organisation there from Westminster deciding what the Scottish government can do, in a sense you are putting an end to devolution with the stroke of a pen. But I haven't seen the video. I haven't seen it. I just saw the first few minutes of it, so I will go back and check that. But it is concerning because I think what the Tories want to do is they're afraid of a second referendum because they're pretty sure they'll lose it. So what they're trying to do is they can either try to stop a second referendum so it doesn't actually happen, and then they don't have to worry about the result of that, or what they're trying to do is they're trying to put obstacles in the place in obstacles for the Scottish government to operate. But I think a lot of these things are going to backfire, because if the Scottish government try to do something and they're not able to do it, and it fails, for example, to introduce a new policy that would help the poor, the working class, or workers, or ordinary citizens, if they were to bring in something like that and it was blocked by the UK government, it was blocked by Westminster, they could turn around and say, look, we can't do this because of Boris Johnson's government. And this would increase support for independence. I think going forward, the only way for the Scottish government now is to call for a referendum, whether Boris Johnson likes it or not. They can hold it. Boris Johnson can reject it if he rejects it. And I think it's the Scottish government are in a very strong position, because if they call for a referendum, a non-binding one, because they won't have the support of Westminster, more and more people will support it if it's non-binding, which they can turn around and say, look, this is what the Scottish people want, now you have to give us a proper referendum. But when it comes to devolution, I think they're going to throw as many obstacles in their way. They're going to try and water down devolution wherever they can, be it by introducing new bodies which will attempt to undermine the powers of the Scottish government, or by trying to cut off the money supply. But it would be better for someone Scottish to speak about that, because I am quite ignorant on that. Martin, thanks so much for that super chat. Thanks so much for that. Very kind of you. Killer is very angry. I hope Killer's not angry with me. That happened. The Child Rights Bill was overturned. So this is a way that the Scottish government can say, look, we need to be independent because of what Boris Johnson's government is doing. They're not allowing us to provide benefits to ordinary people in Scotland. Max, what's your thoughts on why Scotland didn't get an arrangement like the Northern Ireland Protocol? Crucius Signicus, thanks so much for that super chat. Very kind of you. Scotland wouldn't get it because, Scotland is not Northern Ireland, and the Northern Ireland Protocol was necessary principally to protect the Good Friday Agreement, and then secondly to protect the single market. There was no need for a Northern Ireland Protocol in Scotland, so that's why Scotland didn't get it. I don't think the Scottish government actually campaigned for one or put pressure for something like that, but it was principally to protect peace in Northern Ireland. So it wasn't necessary for Scotland to have it. Now, looking at what the Northern Ireland Protocol has done, or how it has protected Northern Ireland from Brexit, I think the Scottish government would very much like to have something like that. But I don't think that's the goal of the Scottish government at the moment. Their principal goal is, look, there's no point having a Northern Ireland type protocol in Scotland. We need to become independent, because then we can decide for ourselves. Because a problem with being part of the problem for Northern Ireland is that it has, at the moment, no real say, because it's in a sense part of the single market, but it's not a member of the European Union. So it doesn't have an MEP, it doesn't have any power, it doesn't have any influence in Brussels. While if Scotland became independent, it would have its MEPs, it would have seats in Brussels, it would have a voice in Brussels. It would be part of the decision-making process. So I think, yes, it would have been beneficial for Scotland to have something like the Northern Ireland Protocol, but that was never really on the cards, because it was not necessary. Killer isn't the only one that's angry. I hope not angry with me. Angry with my... Okay, nah. Angry with my ignorance on Scotland, which is profound. So I think this about the fishing was another storm in a teacup, a bit like what happened with the Northern Ireland Protocol, the invoking of Article 16 at the beginning of the year, where allegedly it was invoked by the European Commission, when in reality it was not. The European Commission considered invoking Article 16. What happened was the Irish government got on the phone to them and says, "What the hell are you doing?" And the Commission said, "Okay, we'll back down." But Article 16 was not invoked. That's not how it works. It's not, as I said before, it's not a big red button that you press and something explodes some distance away. Westminster money is given to Scotland. Well, what happens is money is taken from Scotland and then it's redistributed back to Scotland according to certain criteria. But the Westminster government decides on that criteria, it seems. So the Westminster government could decide, we're not going to give you all the money that you normally get. So the money comes from Scotland from taxes, from the sale of gas and stuff like that, and then the money is handed back in a sense, in a similar way that money is collected by central government and then redistributed. In Scotland, it works differently, and it is quite complicated that I'm not going to get into. But yes, Scotland get money from Westminster, but it's money that they've already handed over. It's like I don't know where people are from, but for example, here in Italy, the regions collect their taxes, they're sent to Rome, and then Rome redistributes some of that money back. And some regions get more than they put in, and some regions get less. The money formula. Artemis, great to see you on the stream. Hope you're well tonight. We're all angry. We all are angry, yes, says Leland. And I think this anger is just going to grow, because as long as Boris Johnson is in charge, I think for Tories in particular, I'm not talking about the Labour Party, I'm not talking about the Liberal Democrats, but for Tories, it must be extremely difficult for them to show their face in public every time Boris Johnson opens his mouth in Scotland. Like, if you're a Tory in Scotland, it must be terrible, because Boris Johnson is undermining the union every time he speaks. He's making it worse. He's making it more and more difficult for them. And the Tory MPs are one thing, the members of the Conservative Party in Scotland are another thing. But ordinary people who support them, how do they look at that? How do they watch Boris Johnson at COP26? How do they see him when he talks about Brexit, when he's acting like a buffoon? How do they look at that and say, yes, we need the union. We need to support the union. I know some of them will say, look, Boris Johnson is not permanent. Boris Johnson will be gone in a few years' time, and we shouldn't throw away the union because of that. But it doesn't really work like that. We vote on things of today. We don't vote for things in the long term. And at the moment, if you're looking at competent leaders, one is Nicola Sturgeon. If you're looking at an incompetent leader, the other is Boris Johnson. And Boris Johnson has more power. That's the worst thing about it. Let's move on. Of course, this is a story. I actually touched on it in one of the videos, but I just wanted to talk about it again tonight. It says here, this man from yesterday, it says, I wish I'd voted to stay in. Brixham fishers on the cost of Brexit. So Ian Perks knows better than most about the post-Brexit vision that was sold to the fishing industry by Vote Leave team and now Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Looking over Brixham Harbour from his office, the fish merchant recalls meeting Johnson in August 2019, less than 6 months before the UK ended its relationship with the European Union. He's telling me we're going to have to take on extra staff because we're going to be so busy, Perks said. With all this free trade, they're going to want our fish. Asked how he now views the Prime Minister, he pauses. I'm disappointed, he replies bitterly. He never mentioned the extra costs. To Perks and others in the Brixham fishing industry, the current dispute with France over the number of licenses issued to French fishermen to operate in UK waters is the latest in a long line of issues to hit business after Brexit. If there wasn't any Brexit, there wouldn't be any issues, he said. We are getting on fine before that. But Perks surprises with a key admission. He voted to leave the European Union. I've been trolled since I first revealed this, but I wish I had voted to stay in. I never realised we were going to incur all these costs. We were told it was going to be free trade. Now, this is where, and I've talked about this in the videos as well, and I've talked about this before on the channel. How can we feel sympathy for somebody who believed Boris Johnson? Like, I remember, and look, I'm not holding myself up as some sort of expert. I'm anything but an expert. Just hear what I just said about Scotland. But when Boris Johnson was telling people in Northern Ireland he's not going to put a border in the Irish Sea, and in the same moment, his government was preparing the paperwork for businesses to export into Northern Ireland, that they'd have to, preparing the groundwork for them to complete the paperwork for exporting into Northern Ireland. And Boris Johnson said there would be no border. And even before that, I said, a border has to go somewhere. If there's a single market on one side and there isn't a single market on the other, then you have to have a border somewhere. And the response from the Brexiteers was, no, that's just Project Fear, or stop scaremongering. There's no need for a border. We're going to sort it out. Just believe enough in Brexit. But if experts, not me, of course, but if experts were saying, you need to have a border, you need to control trade, and Boris Johnson was saying, no, believe me, how can someone turn around and say, yeah, I'm going to believe Boris Johnson? I know these experts who've been trading, who know trade, who understand trade, whose job it is to understand trade. They're telling me that there needs to be a border. And Boris Johnson says, no, just believe me. What is Boris Johnson's background? He was a politician. He was the mayor of London. He wrote for the Telegraph, I think it was. That's his background. So why did people believe a journalist who lied, a politician who lied, the mayor of London who lied, over somebody whose job it is to provide expert advice? And I've made this comparison before, or comparison similar to this before. It's like, you have heart problems. And this is not a criticism of people, a mechanic or something. But if you don't go to a mechanic when you have heart problems, you go to a cardiologist. And you don't go to the cardiologist and the cardiologist says, look, you need to stop drinking, you need to do exercise, you need to take this medication. And then you go to the mechanic and the mechanic says, no, believe me, I know what I'm talking about. You need to eat more fries. You need to drink more beer. No, I'm not disparaging mechanics, of course. I'm just using it as an example. No logical person would do that. No rational person would do that. But when it came to the fishing industry, yes, we're going to listen to Boris Johnson. We're going to listen to Nigel Farage. We're not going to listen to experts in trade. We're not going to listen to the head or the former head or chairman of the World Trade Organization. We're not going to listen to those. We're going to listen to politicians, because of course politicians have our interests in heart. Politicians would never lie to us, even though, yes, we know that they've lied for so long. So a mechanic would suggest more oil. Very good point. Oh my God. Audrey, great to see you on the stream tonight. Hope you're well. I always worry when people join the stream while I'm mid through some sort of rant, probably going, what the hell is he talking about? Has he lost his marbles again? But it goes on to say, of course, so to perks and others, the fishing, Brexit, we were all going to be fine before that. But it surprises when we voted to leave. I've been trolled on the... Okay, said that. So Brexit created mountains of paperwork for Perks and his industry peers. He says sales are down and costs are up. And it's all down to the departure from the European Union. And the latest fight with the French threatening to blockade their ports is adding to their woes. It doesn't impact Brixham, he said. They started blockading the port. We're not going to be able to... it does affect Brixham, he said. They start blockading the port. They're not going to be able to send fish. But now here is where it goes a bit south. Despite his regrets, he believes the way forward is for the UK to toughen up its stance towards France. You've listened to the liars. The liars have thrown you under a bus. And your response to this is, well, if the liars act tough, then I'm going to listen to the liars again. Where is he getting this idea from? Oh, we have to act tough. He's getting it from the likes of the Express or the Daily Mail or the Sun. So the very newspapers that lied to him back in 2016, he's turning around and saying, okay, they lied to me, but I'm going to read them again in case they can give me some better information. They want to bring their wines and cheeses and delicacies into the UK. Let's make it tougher for them, he said. Let's put tariffs on them. Let's stop Citroën and Renault bringing cars in. Let's make it difficult as they're making it for us, because it can work both ways. It doesn't work both ways. This is what Lord Digby Jones said. Yes, we can just put tariffs on their cars when they're coming in. Do you understand that putting tariffs on things makes it more expensive for people in the country? Now, do you understand that if the market is no longer viable for these businesses, they'll send their cars somewhere else? He just doesn't get it. He's been lied to. He suffered the consequences of being lied to, and he's turning around and listening basically to the people who've lied to him. I don't know what to say anymore. Morris Reid, a skipper on the Margaret Ann, a scallop boat, said a blockade at the French ports could potentially see them lose up to £20,000 every few days. But he believes if Brexit had not happened, the industry would still be facing one dispute or another. It's ridiculous. But the problem with this is, look, if you had a dispute with the French while being a member of the European Union, you could take it up with the European Union. So this is, once again, this problem that many people who voted for Brexit, not everyone, of course, I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush, but a lot of people seem to think that, and they bought this Kool-Aid, they bought this line from the likes of Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, that the EU was something external, that the UK was a member, but Europe was something different, or Europe was something external. So the UK was both at the same time in the European Union and outside the European Union. The European was something alien, foreign. I don't know how they got their head round that, because it's illogical, but they still believe that. Lord Digby Chicken Caesar. But they believe that, well, you know, if we had left, even if we hadn't left, the situation would be bad. But you would have a voice in Brussels. You would be able to, petition other countries within the European Union to come to your side. There's a conflict always between different member states. You could use that to your advantage. I don't agree with doing that, but that's politics. The French and the Germans don't like each other too much. So if the British say, look, we don't like how the French, as if the UK was still a member, the British could go to the Germans and say, look, can you work with us? We'll try and help you out when you're having problems with the French. Come to our side, work with us, and we'll, you scratch our backs, we'll scratch yours when necessary. Maybe not the Germans, it could be the Italians, or it could be the Spanish, or whatever. And that's how it works. And you could use that to your advantage. But now that you're outside, you can't do that. You can't go to the Germans and say, help us out. They'd be like, why? Why should we? And we've seen that when it came to the Hungarians last year. The Brexiteers thought that the Hungarians would come to their side. And I said at the time, they're not. Because there's no advantage for them. They are inside the club. There's no advantage for them helping someone who's outside the club or on their way out of the club. The Brexiteers thought that the Hungarians would come to their aid, the Poles would come to their aid, and it failed to materialise. Because the Brexiteers thought that the Hungarians love Britain more than they hate the EU. Or something like that. Or that they were willing to help Britain, who's outside, in order to punish the EU. No, because they would suffer the consequences of that in some other way. They knew which side their bread was buttered on. It's ridiculous. The French, if you look at the charter and how the quota is broken down, have got about 90% of the quota. This is what Boris Johnson signed up to. It just seems that they want more and more and more. Of course they want more and more and more. Boris Johnson has compromised. Like, if Boris Johnson is willing to sell things off for free, you imagine this, you have a neighbour who's selling everything from their house for free. Well, wouldn't it be ridiculous give it away for free, I should say. If you have a neighbour who's giving away things for free, well, you can't blame people who go there and try and take as much as they can. And Boris Johnson, his government, gave away the farm. It's all for votes. There's an election in France after Christmas. Macron is just trying to get the votes. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's how politics work. Yes, maybe you're right. But it doesn't change the situation. We've been looking into it. If they blockade the ports, we'll put more stuff through Holland. And who does that help? It helps the Dutch. Not so much the French. But once again, but you have to go further. It's more expensive. It's more costly for you to do that. It's an inconvenience for you. Otherwise, you'd be doing it now. So it's not a real solution. Boris Johnson needs to grow a backbone. Why do they think it comes down to Boris Johnson being tough? Boris Johnson doesn't give a crap about you. Boris Johnson could have the greatest backbone of... he could have the backbone of, I don't know, what's his name? Conan the Barbarian. But it wouldn't make any difference because Boris Johnson doesn't give a crap. Boris Johnson needs to grow a backbone and say enough's enough. Once again, these people have their money invested in the wrong person. They have their livelihoods hitched to somebody who wants to drive the truck over a cliff. And instead of detaching it and saying maybe we shouldn't have believed Boris Johnson, they're saying we need to go along with Boris Johnson. We should be blocking the harbours so and see how they like it. It's ridiculous. It's very tough timeline. If scallops are held up 24 hours, they will spoil. You think that you have power over Boris Johnson, and you think Boris Johnson has power over the French. And you don't have any power over Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson doesn't care about the French. If it was somebody else in charge, perhaps you could use these arguments, but in reality, you're asking the laziest politician probably in the history of politics to do something for you. It's like asking, what's his name? Donald Trump to donate money to charity. No, he'd prefer to set up a charity where he gives the money to himself. Loic Farham, 31, a skipper of the fishing boat Sunderland, has relocated from Jersey to Brixham because of the wider implications of Brexit. Since Brexit, we've been shafted, he said. Previously, Jersey fishers could head straight into French ports, but since Brexit, they've been required to return to Jersey, narrowing the window in which they can fish. Benefit of Brexit. He now finds himself living on his small boat, and his wife and children are back in Jersey. He doesn't expect to see them until Christmas. I can see over here how they feel about EU membership, but in Jersey, it should never have affected us. We didn't even get a vote. Yes, Jersey had no vote on the referendum because Jersey is not a member of the UK, although Jersey, of course, is affected by all of this. We've been sucked into it. I wish things had stayed as they were. I need to support my family. If I don't fish, I don't get any money. Brexit puts so many more restrictions, too many variables. Others are more optimistic, mending nets on the harbour side on a sunny Monday morning. Wesley Lowland said it was true that the cost had risen, but so has the price of fish. Shellfish trade is suffering, but I'm not worried. The fish trade has been pretty good. It's probably okay for premium products because you're able to do something with it, and if it's more expensive, you can add on that extra cost. And if it's a premium product, the consumer can absorb that. But for the lower end of the scale, it's not going to benefit these fishermen. It's sad in a way, but unfortunately, a lot of these voted for Brexit, and a lot of these still think Boris Johnson is going to come through, or they hope that Boris Johnson is to come through. And if any of them are listening to this, I'm sorry, but Boris Johnson does not give a crap about you. Boris Johnson will never give a crap about you. You served a purpose for him. You're like a fishing net. When the fishing net has served its purpose, what do? You throw it away. Hopefully not in the sea. You recycle it. But that's the way Boris Johnson has treated the fishing communities. You served a purpose for Brexit. Fantastic. Now has Boris Johnson returned to these people to explain why they can't sell their fish? And what pisses me off as well is that they're not protesting. Why aren't they protesting? Why aren't they going to Westminster? They're sitting on the key. They're complaining, but they're not actually doing anything about it. Even though I don't think it would serve any real purpose, because once again, Boris Johnson doesn't give a crap. They would be probably arrested, and the British public probably wouldn't care about it either. But not all the British public, but people would say, look, you sort of voted for this. So it's a bit hard to have sympathy for you if you voted for this. So guys, on a lighter note, let's see a comedy video, and then we'll get back to the serious stuff in a moment. So as we're halfway through the stream, or over halfway through the stream, I want to bring up this funny moment, and then we'll get back to the serious talk.
So you say we have to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions, and yet presumably you breathe it out every day.
Yes, everybody does.
And yet you expect other people to stop breathing out.
No.
Such a hypocrite. Do you have a job?
Yes, I'm a gardener.
You're a gardener, so you prune plants, do you?
Sometimes.
And how exactly is that different from demolishing buildings?
Well, buildings don't grow back stronger if you knock them down.
Yes, they do. I assume you also consume food?
Of course, although I'm a vegan, so...
Oh, so you only eat plants?
Yes.
Defenceless plants. What have they ever done to you?
Nothing.
And yet you devour them with no thought to their welfare.
Plants aren't conscious?
Yes, they are. I talk to plants all the time.
Do you not get enough callers?
Okay, alright, cheerio sunshine, bye-bye. Right, let's get that on social media. Someone's made himself look like a right prick.
Lovely. Before we're going to continue, I want to read some of your comments, because I was blabbing away for a long time there on my own. Duty calls back later, I hope. Great to hope to see you again, Derek. When the fisherman says that his catch was shit, I'm not sure now what he means. Yeah, unfortunately, if you're trying to catch fish at the moment, it can turn out to be not fish. It can be something much worse than fish. Maybe highly processed fish, if you understand what I mean. No mercy, you again. Now speaking for all of Wales, are you? Oh no, sorry, that was a comment to somebody on the stream. Is this based on an actual event? I'm not sure what you mean. The video was based on another video which had gone viral with Mike Graham from Talk Radio. I have to admit that I support vegetable rights. Drums to the bass whoop. Great to see you on the stream. Hope you're fine tonight. Okay, I'll just stick with one more Brexit story and then we'll move on. Northern Ireland leaders being shut out of Brexit talks, says Labour. This is something I've already talked about before, how Lord Frost is ignoring a certain section of society in Northern Ireland and focusing on the likes of the DUP and loyalist parties and movements, organisations representing loyalists in Northern Ireland, and ignoring, to a certain extent, those who are pro-protocol. So the Labour Party has called on the government and the EU to lift the veil of secrecy over the talks about new Brexit agreements for Northern Ireland, urging them to give local politicians a seat at the negotiations table. Now, the European Union have actually said this, that they would like to have stakeholders, business leaders and politicians involved. You know who said no? Lord Frost said no. As the talks inch towards the deadline the UK government has set for making the decision to trigger Article 16 and suspend parts of the protocol, the Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary Louise Hay said it was unsustainable for leaders, businesses and civic society to be shut out on huge decisions taking place about their future. She made her remarks as the Taoiseach Micheál Martin revealed that the US President Joe Biden had pulled him aside after a formal COP26 conference in Glasgow to tell him that he was watching the Northern Ireland Brexit talks closely. He called me aside after the meetings to, again, make it clear that the United States takes the Good Friday Agreement very seriously. To use his words, it matters greatly to me and to the United States, and said he has made this clear to the UK government. Speaking at the start of October, the Brexit Minister David Frost said the conflict over the protocol needed to be settled within 3 weeks, but last week had said significant gaps remained between the two sides, particularly on state aid and the role of the European Court of Justice, neither of which are a concern to businesses and stakeholders in Northern Ireland, apart from some who, well, are just using it as something to attack the protocol. Whitehall sources suggest that the earliest a decision on triggering Article 16 could be made is the third week of November after COP26. Lord Frost and the European Commission Vice President Maros Šefčovič are due to meet on Friday to assess progress in talks. Earlier it emerged that Frost's drive to get the existing Northern Ireland Protocol scrapped was as much rooted in opposition to the deal Theresa May struck in 2017 as it was in delivering the new agreement to the union's community that opposed the protocol. Writing in a foreword to a newspaper for the Policy Exchange think tank, which is a right-wing think tank, Frost said that the EU-UK joint report, which set the terms of the Article 15 process of divorce from the EU as a result of the UK failing to make the necessary mental shift from being a member of the EU to negotiating exit from the EU. He urged negotiators not to stoke tensions over the protocol, which has prompted a resurgence in identity politics in Northern Ireland, and to bring local leaders in from the sidelines. A problem here with all of this is that Frost has been moving backwards in time, it seems, when it comes to blaming. So he started off by blaming the European Union for misinterpreting the protocol. Then he started blaming himself, in a sense, for not understanding the protocol, or how the protocol had changed since he had written it, that it was not set in stone, that it was dynamic, and that it had to be, it wasn't fit for purpose. Then he started blaming Theresa May's government for tying his hands. Like, he can't take responsibility for something that he signed and he agreed and signed. And he handed over to Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson ran with it in 2019 and won an 80-seat majority on. He can't accept responsibility for that. He has to undermine it at every turn. But I think the motivation here is to keep Brexit alive, to keep the tension high, so when the next election comes, they can use it as some sort of weapon, because they know that, okay, certain people are not happy with the European Union. We need to keep the enemy of the European Union fresh in people's minds. And we're the only party who are standing up to the European Union. The Labour Party are in bed with the European Union. And we've heard all of this before. And I think, ironically, Boris Johnson is going to use Brexit again at the next election. And he's willing to use Northern Ireland. And this is not a surprise. It should not be a surprise to anyone, because, as I said before, Boris Johnson does not care about anyone but Boris Johnson. Some of the fishermen still think that Boris Johnson cares about the fishing communities and the fishing industry and the fishermen themselves. He doesn't. He's demonstrated that. The people of Northern Ireland, I think, have a better understanding of Boris Johnson's behaviour. People like Jeffrey Donaldson, maybe not. Jeffrey Donaldson still thinks if he can convince Boris Johnson to be honest, he will. Maybe it's a desperate hope he has. It's not going to happen. But once again, Brexit is going to be a tool for Boris Johnson to maintain some support in Westminster. The Tories are going to lose seats, but he needs to have something he can weaponise once again. And he realises that Get Brexit Done was a vote winner. Don't think he can use that again, but he may use some sort of Brexit tool. And it's sad that Northern Ireland has been thrown under a bus once again. And we've seen recently, I covered this in a video the other day, a bus was attacked in Newton Ards in Northern Ireland. The men got on board the bus, they forced the driver off, and they mentioned the protocol the Northern Ireland Protocol. This was in a unionist area, and now a bus has gone, a public service has been destroyed. Children who were using the bus, elderly people who relied on the bus to get into town, don't have this service anymore. And the bus probably will not be replaced. You know, it's obvious why that would not be the case, or that would be the case of it not being replaced. Because you have the likes of Lord Frost banging on about how the protocol is undermining Northern Ireland's place in the UK. You have unionists in Northern Ireland banging on about how Northern Ireland is being annexed by the European Union. And you have a lot of young people with a lot of time on their hands getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to hijack a bus. 6:30, I think it was. So they got up probably at 6 a.m., put on their masks, got their weapons ready, went down to the bus stop, wherever it was, and hijacked this bus. Not on direct orders from, of course, the likes of Frost or the DUP, but following the rhetoric of Frost and the DUP. DC, thanks so much for that super chat. Do you think Irish reunification will come before or after Scottish independence? That's a difficult question to ask, because I think it's difficult to answer, because Irish reunification is not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be a gradual process. So I would say, and then Scottish independence is not going to be something that's going to happen overnight either. So Scotland could hold a referendum tomorrow. If the referendum, if there was a majority yes vote in the referendum, independence would not happen immediately. There would be a process. There would be a transition period out of the UK. There would be negotiations taking place on what type of government would be set up. There would be negotiations on the type of agreements between what would happen, when it comes to the military or whatever, between the Scots and the English, and Westminster, I should say. And that would be a process that would take a number of years. But I think if we're looking at a united Ireland and an independent Scotland, I think they would go in parallel almost. I think they would eventually arrive at their destinations at around the same time. Now, when that time would be, it could be 5 or 10 years from now. But the reason it's difficult to predict is because we're talking about something not so much technical, but something political. Technically, these things could be achieved very quickly, but politically, they take a long time. Because many people don't want them to happen. Many people want to throw barriers in the way. And I've said before, Scotland's independence, a lot of the questions surrounding Scottish independence can be resolved very easily, because a lot of them are technical problems. The political problems are the more difficult ones to solve. So the technical, Scotland wants to join the European Union. I don't see any technical problems with that. They can meet the criteria. The issues would be political, not technical. And I think the same with the United Ireland. Technically, a United Ireland could happen in a year, but politically, I don't think the entire North and South would be ready for that. Nucky Brot, thanks so much for that super chat. Very kind of you once again to be on the stream. Boris Johnson's arguments always feel like a big crybaby. Be like, no, you. Well said. And thanks to DC as well for that super chat. Boris Johnson's arguments. I've said this before. Boris Johnson sounds like somebody who doesn't want to be Prime Minister. He would prefer not to be Prime Minister. He just wants to be Prime Minister for, as we say in Ireland, for the crack, for the fun of it. He likes debating in Parliament. It probably reminds him of his Eton days. He likes, the glamour of it, flying around the world, meeting with presidents and prime ministers and royalty. He probably likes that. The fine dinners and the attention. He loves that. But the hard work of prime minister, he doesn't want to do that. And you see that when there is a crisis. When it came to the pandemic, he went on holiday. When it came to issues in Northern Ireland, he was silent. Whenever there's or when the flooding, remember the flooding, it took him weeks to come out and meet with the families and business leaders and whoever were affected by the flooding back in 2019, before the election. When it comes to doing the hard work, the unglamorous work, he waits and waits and waits until it becomes impossible for him not to ignore. Where he's probably forced down to, somebody says to him, Prime Minister, you need to go. And he doesn't want to go. He's like a spoiled child. He doesn't want to go to the dentist or doesn't want to go to school in the morning. And he thinks that if he just ignores it, it will go away. Or if he thinks he, throws a temper tantrum, it will go away. And eventually he has to go through with it. David McGuinness, I'll do a show with you on that, Max. I need some education on Scottish independence, so I definitely and David has been waiting very patiently in the queue to do a live stream with myself on Scottish independence and also the heavy goods vehicle driver shortage and how it's affecting businesses and industry in both Scotland and the rest of the UK. So I definitely need to do something with David as soon as possible. So I'll speak with you about that, definitely. I'm sorry, I have had so many things offline that have consumed so much of my time. Anyway, let's move away from Brexit for a moment and let's go to, of course, the other big event this week, COP26. So there's some good news and, of course, there's some bad news. Thanks so much, David, for that as well. US rejoins coalition to achieve 1.5 degree goal at UN climate talks. It is a little bit depressing that, we're not looking at reducing emissions, but we're about allowing emissions temperatures to increase by a certain degree. When it came to the pandemic, we moved heaven and earth. Why did we do that? Because we needed to protect our healthcare systems, but we also wanted to protect industry. We wanted to get back to normal as soon as possible. And unfortunately, we threw everything we needed at it. We spent billions and billions and billions. When it comes to the environment, when it comes to the climate, we will make promises, and then a few years down the line, we will make the same promises again. That's what I find so disheartening about all of this. A lot of things are progressing. Excuse me. There is a lot of progress being made in industry. Governments are progressing, but I think it's just too slow. So it says the US has rejoined the High Ambition Coalition at the United Nations climate talks, the group of developed and developing countries that ensured a 1.5 degree goal was the key plank of the Paris Agreement. And a problem with this as well is that Joe Biden, will he be president in 2024? I don't know. Will Trump be back? I bloody well hope not. Will a Republican be in the House, the White House at the next, will it be a Republican president next time? If it is, they'll probably roll back this. Because the Republican Party don't care about the environment. The Democrats do seem to, and it seems to go from one caring to one not caring to one caring to one not caring, and this isn't a way to progress. This decision by the world's biggest economies and second biggest emitter after China to return to the High Ambitions Coalition group of countries marks a significant boost to efforts to focus the COP26 summit on limiting temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the tougher of the two goals of the Paris Agreement. The coalition, which numbers scores of countries at the 2015 Paris talks, will on Tuesday call on governments to step up their efforts on greenhouse gas emissions and phasing out coal, consistent with the 1.5 degree limit, and urge rich nations to double the amount of climate finance that they make available for poor countries to adapt to the impacts of climate change. We have the money. We can pump money. We can, and I've said this before, money is virtual. Money exists on a computer screen. If we want, we can pay for these things. And the amounts of money we're talking about is nothing compared to the amounts of money we waste by trying to fix these problems once they've happened, or trying to clean up. They also want to bring an end to subsidies for fossil fuels. Why can't we take the subsidies that we have for fossil fuels and hand them over to renewable industries? Just tomorrow, sorry, oil companies, you're not getting these subsidies anymore. Even though these companies, these fossil fuel companies, are making huge profits, they're also receiving subsidies. So the taxpayer is paying these companies who are making profits. How is that logical? Of course it's not. It's corruption. We take the subsidies and we give them to the renewable energy firms to develop new technologies, to implement these technologies. Johan, thanks so much for that super chat. Why is the UK burning gas instead of using electricity, and use proper windows, 3-pane glass, and insulate the houses? Because the Tories don't want to invest in this. And I think at this stage, because Boris Johnson has an 80-seat majority, the Tories are just milking the system for whatever they can get. Getting contracts to do things that, to win. They're just about winning contracts, handing over donations to win contracts. There's no real motivation to actually do anything that will help the environment, to help the country. Look at what happened with Brexit, unfortunately. If you look at what's happening with Brexit at the moment, the country has been thrown under a bus in order to keep racists happy and to keep donors happy. When Boris Johnson says, yeah, we're going to commit to 1.5 degree limit, I don't believe one word he has to say there. Because he has lied on every occasion. He has lied about everything. So of course he's going to say, yeah, I'm going to do that. He has no intention of implementing policies. He'll pretend to, but there's no intention to do it. Why is the UK doing it? Because it's easier. Because it takes effort. It takes political fortitude to say we're going to phase out these things. There's a lot of resistance, of course, but a strong government who cares about the country will say, look, we're going to have to stop using gas and coal and oil. We have to move away from that. We'll help those industries, will help find workers jobs in these new industries, will provide support for the smaller companies who are phasing out of coal and fossil fuels. We need to support them, but not at the expense of the environment and not at the expense of the future. Even if people don't care about climate change, phasing out coal and fossil fuels is better for cleaner air and cleaner water. We want to have clean air. Thousands of people die every year from respiratory problems because of pollution, because we're burning coal, we're burning oil, we're burning fuel in cars. We eliminate that. Sometimes I notice when I'm driving around here in Italy, and some of you have probably seen it yourself, when you're driving through the tunnels, some of the tunnels, the walls of the tunnels are black. I've never stopped because you can't stop, but I can imagine if you were to stop and rub your finger on the wall, it would be covered in soot or covered in oil or whatever residue it is. And that's from the years of cars passing through. And I was thinking, imagine if we cleaned that off and we did a complete change over to electric cars, there would be no soot on those walls anymore. There'd be dust maybe, but there would be no soot. There'd be no residue of fossil fuels being burnt. And also think of the noise as well. Electric cars are much quieter. It'd be less noise pollution. As something you see on many motorways, they have the barriers to keep the noise away from private buildings. They'd probably no longer be necessary. But I'm getting a bit sidetracked there. The coalition, which I read that the senior US official, the High Ambition Coalition, not really a fan of this because we should be reducing the temperature if possible, or maybe it's no longer possible to reduce the temperature. We just have to live with a higher temperature, but maybe it is a high ambition. Was instrumental in Paris in making sure that the high ambition was written into the Paris Agreement, and will be instrumental in Glasgow in making sure it's delivered. Tina Stage, the climate envoy for the Marshall Islands, said the High Ambition Coalition has set a bar that needs to happen at this COP. Getting on track to limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees with enhanced national determination contributions and with real actual actions like phasing out coal, sea change on adaptation, which at least a doubling of current levels of adaptation financing, and making sure that we all have the resources we need to face this crisis, including the loss and damage we're already experiencing today. These heads of state have given their marching orders for ambition. One negotiator said fears that the 1.5 degree was in danger of slipping out of reach had prompted the group's resurgence. We are extremely concerned about the 1.5 degrees, they said. What they are calling on is for a way to keep the 1.5 degree as a viable option. The High Ambition Coalition was formed in the run-up to Paris by a chief negotiator for the Marshall Islands, Tony DeBron. Though a tiny Pacific island made up of 29 atolls has a population of nearly 60,000, the charismatic DeBron had a major influence in climate COPs. I want to show you a video related to... let me see, I don't miss a super chat. Apologies. Sly, thanks so much. Sly Tendencies, thanks so much for that. 87. Been a fan for years. Thank you for everything. Thank you so much, Sly. Very kind of you. Hope you're well tonight. Take care. It goes on to say, no, I want to show you this video related to this. One moment. No, I'll start with this one.
A meeting to remember or one to forget. Boris Johnson, having downplayed hopes of progress in Glasgow, said it no longer felt like the world was 5-1 down against climate change at half-time.
I think what you could say today, after 2 days of talks with around 120 world leaders, is that we've pulled back a goal, or perhaps even two. And I think we're going to be able to take this thing to extra time, because there's no doubt that some progress has been made. We're ending the Great Chainsaw Massacre with more than 85% of the world's forests to be protected by the end of this decade.
Why does he have to bring in some sort of comedy into everything like this?
An unprecedented agreement by 122 countries now.
I seem to be missing the president of Gabon. He's coming. Okay.
But the forestation deal, formally announced at this session, has been years in the making and can't have come as a huge surprise to Boris Johnson. There's an element of expectations management around here.
I'm confident we can do this. All we need to do is summon the will to do what we know is right and we know is necessary and know is within our capacity. So, as simple as it sounds, I think it is this simple. Let's get to work. We can do this, and it'll have a generational impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your inspirational words.
Some at this conference question how well the deforestation pledges can be policed.
Some of them, the leaves are starting to curl up because we're a bit chilly near the front door. These ones
they're not enjoying Glasgow.
Not so much.
And there are question marks over whether the promise to cut methane by 30% this decade can be delivered. President Biden's own contribution to that total hangs in the balance as he tries to push a package of climate change measures through Congress.
Being small does not prevent us to be ambitious.
Tiny San Marino was the only country to send two leaders jointly to the lectern as another day passed of leaders' speeches before they burn carbon flying home.
Can you go home to Mauritius with a message of hope?
Well, in terms of the interventions that I have heard from world leaders, of course there is hope.
Is it enough? Have you heard enough?
But I think what is important is we need to translate concretely what is being said into action.
And you worry about that?
We worry about that because in the past we have seen those commitments which have been taken, unfortunately, have not been realized.
One absentee leader turned up on a video link today, but China is the world's biggest polluter and its President Xi didn't even beam in.
It's true that President Xi isn't here, but on the other hand, the Chinese team is very high level. You know, he didn't want. I talked to him. He didn't want to come because of the pandemic, and you've got to respect that. The same was the case for.
Yeah, but he could have used Zoom. No, you know, it wasn't necessary to be there in person. He could have been there. Like, you know, the Russian president was, or what is he, king, czar? Putin was there, you know, by video conference. So I think the Chinese president could have done the same thing.
For Vladimir.
So I think for the Chinese, they don't want to commit to things that perhaps they don't believe they can achieve. China is making a lot of progress in some places and have a long way to go in others. If we look at, for example, when it comes to infrastructure, they have much more railway, much more underground railway as well than many countries. They've laid so much new track over the last number of years compared to, for example, the United States, who have laid very little, if none at all, of new railway. We're talking about also a shift to electric vehicles. This is going to be something that, you know, I think China is going to lead the world on. But when it comes to new coal-fired power stations, that's still a huge problem in China, and I think they see it as, and I'm not making excuses, I think we all need to do something, but I think China wants to go it alone here, and maybe they feel that the restrictions put on them by the United Nations are too strict, and they are going to be able to do better on their own.
Putin, but that doesn't mean the Chinese are not engaging.
Maybe China has taken a few reputational hits over the last year or two, so I think it does care about its reputation, because it cares maybe even more about domestic considerations, as most countries do, but it does care about how it's perceived internationally, particularly in the developing world.
And we don't get to 1.5 without China.
China matters more than anybody.
Thank you. Excellencies, friends, it is of course a pleasure to be...
The last speaker, a cardinal with a message from the Pope. Delegates remain in this tented village, and it stays international territory until next weekend.
The clock on the doomsday device that I talked about is still ticking, but we've got a bomb disposal team on site, and they're starting to snip the wires, I hope some of the right wires, and
Boris Johnson is probably distracting them as they're trying to cut the wires.
My message to them, to the negotiators, is very simple. The leaders of the world may have left or are leaving COP now, but I can tell you that the eyes of the world, the eyes of the populations of the world are on you, and the eyes of the British government and all the other governments that care about this are on our negotiators, and we have your numbers.
So I just want to move finally to one thing that's maybe some positive out of all of this. It says here, COP26 world leaders agree deal to end deforestation. So world leaders have agreed a deal that aims to halt the reverse global deforestation over the next decade as part of a multi-billion-dollar package to tackle human-created greenhouse gas emissions. Xi Jinping, Bolsonaro, and Joe Biden are among the leaders who will commit to a declaration at COP26 in Glasgow on Tuesday to protect vast areas ranging from the eastern Siberian taiga to the Congo Basin, home of the world's second largest rainforest. Land clearing by humans accounts for almost a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions, largely deriving from a destruction of world's forests for agricultural products such as palm oil, soil and beef. By sending the Glasgow leaders' declaration on forest and land use, presidents and prime ministers from major producers and consumers of deforestation-linked products will commit to protect forest ecosystems. Boris Johnson will unveil the agreement at an event attended by the US President Joe Biden, the Prince of Wales, and the Indonesian President Joko Widodo. He is expected to say there are great teeming ecosystems. These cathedrals of nature are the lungs of our planet. Forests support communities, livelihoods and food supply and absorb the carbon we pump into the atmosphere. They're essential to our very survival. The commitment on nature and forest comes as more than 120 leaders come together in Glasgow to thrash out fresh commitments on cutting greenhouse gas emissions amid concerns the key countries have failed to step up to. So it goes on to say Indonesia has pledged to reach net zero emissions by 2070. President Biden has the greatest urgency was needed at the talks. I think when it comes to deforestation, this is one step in the right direction, a major step in the right direction. We need to stop deforestation and we need to begin reforestation where possible. Reforestation also has its problems, but it has to take place in the right land, it has to take place in the right way, and the money has to be invested in the right way. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of corruption around it. But moving forward, we need to first stop deforestation and begin a reforest. And for example, when it comes to China, they're planning on reforesting an area the size of Belgium every year. I think it's every year that they're doing. So this is a major achievement. This is a major reforestation program. So it is understandable that countries like China may not want to get involved in COP26 because they have their own domestic policies, which probably are not seen as reaching the standards of the United Nations ones. But it's also important to remember that China, what China produces, we consume, and that's a huge problem. China is responsible for the production and the carbon footprint when it's produced, but they're producing it for us to consume. If we continue to consume in the way we are, then in a way you can't blame China for the amount of carbon that's produced. So guys, I want to say we're almost at the end of the stream for tonight. I hope something really positive is coming out of COP26. Unfortunately, I'm a bit skeptical about political leaders. I think we need to put pressure on industry. We need to convince industry to change. It's one thing us changing our habits, recycling more, trying to avoid using the car too much, switching cars to more ecological ones, or committing or changing our modes of transport completely by switching to bicycles or public transport. Those are things that we can do on an individual level, but we need industry to change, because industry is the biggest polluter, not so much individual humans even compiled together. It's industry that needs to change, and the only way industry will really change is if they are pressured from government. We need governments we need to vote in governments that care about this, who will put pressure on industry, giving them, both the carrot and the stick, fines, punishment when it comes to, for example, the pollution. And as I've talked about before in the last live stream, the ones who are pumping sewage into into England's lakes and rivers, those people should be in prison. If they knew that they would likely go to prison, they would stop the action overnight. They would stop it immediately if they thought that they were going to go to prison. But if they know the company may get a fine or a slap on the wrist, there's no incentive for them. So that can be the carrot. So that can be the stick, I should say. The carrot can be, if you invest in this, we're going to help you out. If you employ more people to clean up your act, we'll give you incentives. That's what has to change. So guys, I want to say thanks to everyone who came on the stream tonight. I think we're up to over 450 viewers. I hope you all smashed the like button. Wow, number 3, thanks so much. We need to turn the journalists. Yes, that's another action we need to take. Because it's they are the messengers. The messengers. They are the voice of government. And unfortunately, yes, we need to convince them as well. But I think they're easier to convince than the politicians. So we need to attack it at many different angles. Attack this problem. Cheers all. Cheers Max. Thanks so much, number 3, once again. Very kind of you for that super chat. So once again, we're going to finish. Thanks so much to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks for smashing the like button. Thanks to everyone who sent a super chat. Greatly appreciated. And thanks to all the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Couldn't do it without you. So guys, whoever is on Patreon, if you want to jump on to Discord after the stream, I'll see you over there on Discord for a post-stream chat. And I'll see you all next Friday for our live stream. Usual bat time, same bat channel, 9 o'clock. British time, it's Greenwich Mean Time, whatever. The usual time, So guys, have a great week. I'll see you soon. Take care and good night. Of course, I have our one for the road. I'm a bit tired today. How could I have forgotten our one for the road?
I hate to interrupt, Mr. Macron, but Mr. Macron, what? You know the French fishing thing? Brexit means Brexit. You don't get French fishing license. We don't get them. You don't get them. That's what's happening. All right? Okay. Whatever. Good. What you guys talking about? He's a banker.
Back with Janie Guns once again. So guys, have a great night. I'll see you soon on Friday. Take care. As always, stay safe. Good night.